Okay. Good evening to everybody here in Chennai. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever, whichever part of the world you are in. I'm Pratigya Haran, and I'm here to host the storytelling session for and by adults. This is the 10th in the series of 12 sessions. We are at the last weekend of the festival, and we still have lots happening over this weekend. And I'm sure you've seen the list of events, and you've chosen and picked and written it in your timetable as to what you're going to attend and what you'll have to miss, unfortunately. So, moving on to today's session, the first storyteller for the day is June Brown from Toronto. I have been watching you, June, all dressed up with the lights, smile on your face, watching and listening to all the storytellers and sharing your thoughts and reflections on all of them. Um, Looking forward to listening to your story. June is from Toronto. Please introduce yourself fully, June, and share a story with us.
Okay, I'll mute myself. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be telling this morning. And the story I'm going to tell this morning is a personal growth story in my mother-daughter relationship. I stood in front of my mother's condo door, holding the key and staring at the brass numbers 1003. I had driven 3 hours to get to this place, but yet I hesitated before I opened the door. It dawned on me that today would be one of the last times I ever entered this condo. And the job I had to do was going to be difficult, for the condo had been sold, and I now had to get rid of all my mother's worldly goods. For years, as my mother's health declined, I tried to get her to think about perhaps downsizing, going into a retirement home. Well, she still could because she was still very active and her brain was good. But my mother would have none of that. I'm 98 years old, she said. I have lived in this condo over 30 years. I'm going to celebrate my 100th birthday in the party room, and I'm going to die in my bed here. And if you try and stop me, I'm going to call my lawyer on you. I was already in my 70s, but still my mother was the most powerful voice in my life. My father had been killed during the war, and my mother had been a sole parent, the only one with authority. And when she got mad at me, I reverted back to being a child, and I always yielded the field of battle to her. But we don't always get what we wish for, do we? My mother did celebrate her 100th birthday, but she was in a nursing home, suffering from dementia. And I don't even know if she knew I was there. When I finally entered the condo, it was eerily quiet. There was no music coming from the living room. My mother belting out a 40 song on her keyboard. Pardon me, boy, is that the Chattanooga choo choo? Or won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? I'm on the whole night long. No, the living room was quiet. In the family room, there was no Judge Judy on the TV, way, way too loud. There was no greeting coming down the hall. Oh, June, I'm so glad you've gotten here. I always worry about you on the highway. No, I was alone. And I have to tell you, I was angry. It have to be that way. I had wanted her to make some decisions about her things. Who did she want to give things to? I had just downsized myself, and I knew how hard it was to make a decision on what to keep, what to give away, what to junk. And now I had to do it for somebody else's things. I pulled the bags and the boxes into the living room, thinking that would be the easiest place to start. and then my eyes wandered around the room. They fell on the keyboard that was in the corner of the living room, the one my mother taught herself how to play. She didn't read music, but she learned to play well enough that she was invited to play out at dances. I looked around at the living room walls. They were covered with her paintings. This was another thing she started in her senior years, and some of them were good enough to sell. And then my eyes looked down at the coffee table, and there was my mother's most precious thing. It was a copy of a book she published when she was 96. It was a copy of her memoirs. On the cover was a picture of my mother's leg, her 90-year-old leg, ensconced in a red high heel shoe. And the title was Still Kicking, Just Not as High. I had given her that title, and I had taken the picture of her leg. My mother sold over 1,000 copies of that book, and she gave all the money to charity. I looked down at that book and I thought, gosh, my mother might have been old and cranky, but did she have drive and talent? And I could feel some of my anger just slipping away. I moved into her bedroom next, and here I found a talent my mother did not have. She could never organize anything. The whole room looked like a page out of a fine Waldo book. When I pulled open her bedside table drawer, there was a tattered wig, a faded bathing cap, a paintbrush, batteries for her hearing aid, and a family Bible. Good gracious, I thought, Mom, how did you find anything? But I knew the answer. She didn't. Every trip I made to that condo, I would try to organize my mother, organize her papers, organize her kitchen, organize her clothes, only to find on my next visit that was all a shambles again. I could feel that anger coming back a bit. I moved on into the kitchen, and here I had to laugh. Most of the things were gone, but there were still some things in the cupboard. And I wondered, what was a 90-year-old woman going to do with 15 cans of cream of mushroom soup, or a large economy jar of dill pickles from Costco, or enough crackers to feed at a cocktail party of 75? Oh, they were all stale dated, so I threw them in the garbage and moved on into the dining room. Here I found some things I hadn't seen since childhood, or perhaps had never seen. I fished out a cameo brooch from a sugar bowl. I had never seen my mother ever wear this brooch. Where had it come from? And then I found a thank you card, and I didn't recognize the signature on the bottom. I thought I knew all my mother's friends, but I didn't recognize this name. Somebody was thanking her for a kindness she had done. The sad thing was that now that my mother was gone, I couldn't ask her about any of these things. At the end of a long day, I was cleaning out the closet in the hall, and behind an ironing board, I found a garment bag. I pulled it out. It was old. I could see some faded lettering on it, the Advance Shop. Oh, I knew the name of this store. It was the fanciest dress shop in our city, and it sat right across the road from where my mother had her shop. She always went there for her clothes. I pulled on the zipper and pulled out a beautiful wool black winter coat with mink at the collar and mink at the hem. I couldn't believe my eyes. This coat looked brand new, but I knew it to be over 50 years old. I had been there the day my mother bought this coat. It looked so good, I couldn't help but try it on, and I pulled it over. It was a little bit tight. I stroked the mink collar, And as I did so, some memories bubbled up. A memory of my mother in her youth. She was tall and blonde, and oh, she looked beautiful. And then another memory came up, a memory of the day she bought the coat. She called me in the morning. June, she said, I'm going to buy a winter coat today. I want you to come and give me your opinion. Now, my mother didn't need anybody's opinion, but I liked to shop, so I went along with her. My mother tried on coat after coat after coat, and she threw some advice over her shoulder at me. June, she said, when you invest in a winter coat, make sure it's warm and it's stylish because Canadian winters are really long. She finally chose the black coat with the mink collar, and we walked up to the cache where the owner, Mr. Sherman, waited. But here she surprised us because she put the coat down and walked back to the rack and started flipping through again. She picked out a completely different one. It was a beige tweed with a lynx collar. Try this on, she said to me. It'll look good with your red hair. Now, I did not want to try on that coat. My husband was just starting a career. We had two small children. We had no money in our budget for a winter coat for me, and certainly not one from a fancy shop like the Advance shop. But my mother insisted, and like always, I capitulated and I tried on the coat. Oh, when I looked in the mirror, I had to admit it looked wonderful. I reluctantly took it off and went to put it back on the rack when my mother took it from me. And she walked back up to the cache. Mr. Sherman, she said to the owner, I am going to buy two coats today. The black one will be for me, and the tweed one will be for June. That coat was the most beautiful thing I wore for years and years. And my mother was right. It did keep me warm, and I always felt stylish. I took off the black coat I had on. I walked it into the living room, and I put it on a pile I had labeled, very important, do not give away. It took many more days to clean out that condo. My sister came and helped, but just because I found that coat and had those memories, I was able to do the cleaning with no anger in my heart. All that was left was gratitude for a very generous mother. And I've been able to carry that feeling forward. And all the little things that used to bother me about my mom have just drifted away. And now there's only love. Thank you.
Wow, such a beautiful sharing, June. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think it's very special when you share a personal story. Um, your face glows. Actually, it does glow when you share a personal story, and I could see that in you. Tell me more. Why or what was the thought process on picking this story for us today?
Well, it was one of the most changing stories because having an all-powerful mother, all your life there's a power difference kind of, and I was still holding on to that even after she died, and by finding that coat and then being able to understand all the wonderful things she was, as well as the irritating things, I was able to let the other things go. So I am much better for that coat.
Right. A few weeks ago at the festival, I shared a story. Again, it was a personal story about my relationship with my mom. So, listening to your story, I'm rewinding and rethinking about that story. I think it's a very special relationship, right, that you share. And as you said, there are phases of it. So we have parts or times when we are really irritated with them. There are times when we find them overpowering. And then there are times when we realize, you know what, we actually need just gratitude and love, and that's what it is all about. Thank you so much for that, June. Opening it
You're
up to the
welcome.
audience. Audience, any reflections, thoughts, please go ahead.
June, that brought back memories for me. I remember going into my parents' condo after my mom died. She was the second of the two to die, 7 years apart on exactly the same date. And it was one of only 2 times I cried in my adult life. It lasted about 20 seconds. That's about all it lasts when I cry. And it just, there were just, my sisters had come in from out west, and we had cleaned the place out as best we could for a week. And when I was back there that particular time, it was just down to the dregs. And I sat there in the condo and I looked around and I thought, 2 entire lifetimes come down to this. So that, I think it's, yeah, a very powerful and moving experience to have to go into your parents' space and clean it out.
Especially if you're alone. Yeah.
And how long
Especially
ago
if
was
you're
that?
on your that was 7 years ago.
So it probably took that whole 7 years to process that experience, I'll bet.
Well, as I age myself, and I'm in my 80s now, all the things that irritated me, I find I'm doing myself with my own kids. So I have a much better understanding of the aging process now.
Huh. Well, thank you for that story. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Bruce.
It's like life has come a full circle for each one of us in a way, June.
Yes.
Rachel, you want to go ahead?
Yes. I too am very, very moved. And I had a mother also who was that dominant, and into adulthood, she was still a very powerful woman, and what she said went. And if I went against her wishes, it was with great difficulty and a big psychological toll. So I resonate because the two sides, the feeling intimidated and overpowered by your mother, at the same time, the admiration and appreciation for her generosity. So thank you very, very much for your story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We have a few feedback and reflections in the chat box as well. June, I'm sure you'll catch up on them eventually.
Okay.
I think if we have, yes, David. Okay, so now thank you, June. Thank you so much for your story. Moving on to our next teller for the day. We have David Heathfield. Let me just spotlight you, David. David is from the UK. David, please introduce yourself and tell us a story.
Hello, my mother is still alive. She's 97. She's a powerful woman as well. So this is, I'll dedicate the story to mothers that I'm going to tell, and also children. This tomorrow night will be the 5th full moon since October the 7th, and I'm just going to light a candle here for mothers and children everywhere. And I'd like to dedicate the story, as I said, to children. All children, but I'm mindful of the children in Gaza because I know so many of them through projects that I've done. And currently I'm doing a project called Tell a Child in Gaza's Tale, and I'll put a link in the chat. There are so many children that I've learned stories from Gaza. And a teacher that I know very closely, who's also a mother, is Haneen Khaled Jadala, and she's in the UK. She's studying and working, and She's just got her place on a PhD at the University of Warwick, but she's separated from her twin boys who are now 8. They've just turned 8 years old, and they're in Gaza. And I'll share a link to her appeal. She was with us last week grieving for her father. We were made sure we were there with her when she received the news of her father's death. Her husband and her brothers did all they could from Rafah. Sure, we could drive to Birmingham to be with her when they received the news. So this is for her. And also for another mother, Heba Hamouda, who's the person who told me this story, the story I'm going to tell to you now. And I don't know how you are, Heba. I don't know what situation you're in. Heba is an academic, a teacher of English, and a storyteller from Gaza. So here is the story. And I mentioned the 5th moon because it's a full moon story. It's a part of the story. And it starts with a mother. So here we go. Are you ready? Kanya Makan, Fikadim Mazaman, there was once and there was not a mother and her son. And as she lay dying, she said to her son, my boy, whatever you do, always be good. Never walk with evil. And when she passed away, her son left his home to make his way in the world. He didn't know which direction to take. He wandered. And as he wandered across the dry and dusty land, he saw ahead of him a figure lying prostrate on the ground next to a camel. And when he came closer, there was a man with a broken leg. Well, his instinct was to help. So he bandaged up the man's leg, bound it as best as he could, and helped him back onto the back of his camel. Which way are you going? I am travelling across the desert. Can I go with you? If you wish. And who are you? I am one who walks with evil. But the boy had already forgotten his mother's advice, as boys so often do in stories, and he went walking beside that camel along the dry and dusty track. And soon there was no more track. They were wandering the sands of the empty desert. And as they walked, they drank from their water skins, and their water skins ran dry, and they were thirsty. But they were in a desolate place. But it seemed that the evil one who rode on the camel knew where to go, and came to a fissure, an opening in the dry, cracked land. Here there is water. And the boy looked down, and the hole was deep. He couldn't see to the bottom. And the one with the bandaged leg made to climb down as if he was going to go and fetch the water. No, no, said the boy. I will be the one to fetch the water. You hurt your leg. Very well. And the one who walks with evil put his rope tied around a boulder, and the boy climbed down that long rope into the darkness. The cold darkness of that deep fissure. And he came to the bottom of that well, and there was trickling water. And when he tasted the water, it was pure and good. And he filled his water skin, and he filled the water skin of the one above. Now pull us up. I cannot pull you up with 2 full water skins. Give me my water skin first. So the boy attached that man's water skin to the end of the rope, and it was pulled up and up. Now throw the rope back down. But he heard a hollow laughing. Oh no, I have been abandoned. Please come back. But the boy was lost at the bottom of that deep hole with no way out. The sides were sheer. He lay there, wondering what he could do. He had clean water to drink, but there was no food in his bag. How would anybody find me here? There is no path, no track. There he lay as the day turned to night and the night turned to day. The moon every night was growing, and he saw it as it passed above the top of the hole as he gazed above. And now the moon was becoming full. And he had been there so long, he was almost delirious. He was confused bewildered and lost. And he saw that night, as the moon rose full above the top of that hole, two shapes, two forms, beating black wings coming down lower and lower. And they perched at the top of that waterhole. They were crows. And somehow, whether it was because he had drunk the water from that well, I cannot say, he understood the language of those two crows. And one said to the other, "Ah, evil friend, what harm have you caused since we met when the moon was last full?" "Ah," said the second crow, "much evil. I have poisoned the sheikh's daughter, and now she is sick and is about to die, and this will destroy the sheikh, and his wealth will be lost. Ha!" Well, the other crow congratulated the first. "I have done greater evil than you. You know where there was a flourishing green city in the middle of the desert, an oasis. That city is now dry." "Why, what have you done?" said the first crow. "I have blocked the well that supplies water to the city. The city is dry. The people suffer great thirst. Their livestock are dying. The people begging for water. They will all perish." "How can your evil be undone?" said the second crow to the first. "The way that the princess can be saved is if she drank the water from this magical well. The water below would heal her, but none know except you and me." "And how would your evil be undone?" said the second crow. And the second crow said, "Oh, I have placed a pebble in the main spring of the well in the oasis city. No one knows it is there, but if the pebble was removed, the water would return." And the two crows opened their wings and beat their wings, flapping high, silhouetted against the moon, as they congratulated each other and flew off to do more evil. And the boy below had understood everything, and his heart was good. He was his mother's son, and how he wished that he could help that princess and her father the sheikh. How he wished he could save the people in the oasis city, which had run dry. But what could he do? He was abandoned alone, and in his confusion and his delirium he lost consciousness. Perhaps he would die. But he was shaken awake, and there beside him was a friendly face, a young nomad who had climbed down to get water, a person who knew the secrets of the desert. "Have you been here long? You are thin." And the boy began to recount his story and was fed dates and, well, then was pulled up to the top by a rope. And there were nomadic people with their caravan of camels, and they looked after the boy. But he said, "I cannot remain here. Do you know where the sheikh lives? Do you know the city that was an oasis and is now dry?" And they nodded their heads. "Take our fastest horse, and remember to take your water skin." And the boy thanked them for their generosity, and he rode swiftly across the desert, and he didn't hesitate. And he rode and he rode and he rode until he came to that great palace of the sheikh. And the sheikh was a broken man. But the boy, in his humble rags, the skinny boy, said, "I have water that will save the princess." Well, the sheikh was disbelieving, but the boy persuaded him, "There's nothing to lose." The princess was beautiful, but pale, and her eyes were closed as she lay on her soft mattress. He put water from the well onto her lips, and he spoke holy words. And as he spoke these words and the water dripped between her lips, her eyelids flickered, her eyes opened, and she breathed deeply. She sat and took the water skin and took a deep draught. "Father, this is healing water, and I am saved." Well, the sheikh could not believe it. His daughter, the most precious one to him, was saved. My daughter, this young man has saved your life. Then, father, let him be my husband. Agreed, said the sheikh. Will you marry my daughter? Wait, said the young man. I have an important deed that I must undertake first. And when he told the sheikh and his daughter the story, on a promise that he would return soon to marry her, he was lent a faster horse still, and he rode at great pace, galloping across the desert, until he came to what had been an oasis, but was now a barren city, and all channels were dry and dusty. The animals were lying, many dead, most suffering. And the people were so thirsty and begged him for water, but he rode straight past them to the centre of the city, to the dried up well. And he jumped from the horse, and he plunged his arm deep into the well, and stretched and felt with his fingertips the smooth pebble that the evil crow had placed there, drew the pebble from the well, and there was a great gushing, bursting forth of water. Good, clean, fresh water ran through the channels of the city, and the city was once more coming back to life. Soon it was green, the animals were revived, and the people were grateful. This was foretold, they cried. And you, for saving us, must rule over our city. I am just an uneducated young man, but it was foretold that you will rule. Perhaps, he said, if I have the help of a wise wife, a woman of status and importance, of good breeding. And he left them and rode back across the desert, this time not in quite such a rush, although he was keen now to get married. And as he rode back across the desert, he saw a figure on the back of a camel. You, I know you. And the boy knew the one who walked with evil. You abandoned me at the bottom of the well. I did, and now you are alive and well, and what happened? And the boy, being an honest boy, told the evil one all that had happened. How now he would be married to the sheikh's daughter, how he would rule over a great city, and all this because of those two crows, and you say every full moon, and the moon will soon be full again. And the evil one, leaving that boy, rode on his camel to that fissure. He hid the camel behind rocks, tied the rope and clambered down, waited at the bottom of the well for the full moon to come. And you might guess what happened. When the full moon did come and he could see it high above in the dark sky, he saw two crows beating their wings, and they perched at the top, and he heard, having drunk from that well, and knew the words they spoke. And they said, "My evil was undone. Someone saved the sheikh's daughter by giving her water from this well." Ah! And the other one cried, "And my evil was undone. The pebble was removed, and the city once more flows with clean water. It is only possible if one was hiding and spying and listening. And they looked, here is a rope, and there is one below who is listening." And the two crows in their fury scrabbled at the dust and the rocks at the top of the well, and they cascaded down, and they moved and beat their wings until the whole of the sides and the top of the well gave way, and boulders crashed down upon the evil one, and he was buried. The boy was married to the sheikh's daughter with ceremony and joy, and they rode together, leaving the sheikh both sad and glad. And they rode across the desert to what was now once more a beautiful oasis, a living city, and the pair of them ruled wisely and with good hearts, because that boy now remembered the goodness that he had learned from his mother. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Heba. And in the chat, I'm sharing with you 3 links to the project that I'm doing, which is mostly children's stories being retold, and you can tell them too, to an article that Hanin Jadala, the woman I was telling you about, who's about to embark on her PhD, you know, in Gaza it has the highest rate of people with PhDs anywhere in the world. I expect you knew that. And also, I'm going to share a link to Hanin's fundraiser to help her get reunited with her family. Do get involved. And I want to add another side project to this is sharing the poem by Dr. Refat Alaria, If I Must Die. Refat Alaria, who died in an airstrike in December. And so far, the poem's been shared in 29 languages, including many from India in the last week. So thank you so much to you Indian storytellers. I'm not going to name you all, but we've had so many Indian languages just since this festival's been going on, and really appreciating the sharing of that poem in languages all around the world. And if you want to share the poem in another language, or indeed again in the same language, that's very welcome. So thank you very, very much. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, David. Thank you for sharing details about all the different work that you do. I have been following you on Facebook, so I know there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of, especially right now with Gaza, that you have been doing. So appreciate the work that you're doing, and hopefully more of us will be able to join you in your projects there. Coming to the story, such a beautiful story, such a heartwarming story, and you know it's like typically goes down the negative path and then it comes up. And when the boy went to both the places and he sorted things out, I thought that was the end of the story. But it was good that the evil was put to an end. And I think in a way, I think that is what the world needs right now, right? It's always around, but is there a way to put the evil to an end? So that is the thought that came to my mind. Thank you so much for
However
sharing.
hard things are, I believe in truth and reconciliation.
Very true. Yes, very true. Opening it out to the audience, any reflections, thoughts, please go ahead. And I think the story was quite visual as well, David. I could literally see the fissure. I could feel that boy going down the rope and it being pitch dark. And I think overall it was highly visual for me. Yes, June, you want to go ahead?
I was going to say the same thing. I could picture everything. And David, you make a great crow.
Thank you very much. And June, I have to thank you because you know how when you tell a story, you're influenced by what's come before. I've never told that story in such a mother way before. I've never finished it by referring back to the mother. And it was just that conversation before. And I was also struck by something that Bruce said. I must be very different kind of man from Bruce because I cry quite frequently. I cry at sad movies, but I honestly have to tell you, and you won't be surprised to hear that I've never cried so much as I have during these last 5 moons. I weep for what's happening, and let's do what we can to bring this catastrophe to an end.
Anybody else? Any thoughts? Yes, Suvarna, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, David. What a beautiful tell. I think, being a storyteller and telling stories where everything ends in a happy place, still it's so reassuring when you hear it from someone else, you know. And honestly, I think the spirit just lifts up, and so beautifully told. I think I was there. I was entering the story at different places and felt really nice. I loved the story. Thank you, and also felt that pain wherever you were talking about the projects earlier. So, yeah, but all is well is a good feeling. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ivana.
Yes, Rachel, you want to go ahead?
I was with you in the story in every word and every phrase, and you captured the meaning of every word that you said, and you shifted your expressions and your tone and your voice, and you conveyed the joy and the misery and the sorrow, and it was just so well done, but made especially poignant by your introduction, because as you were telling the story about the lack of water, I couldn't but help visualize the desolation in Gaza and all of the people being thirsty and not having water, and suffering and many dying. And the same when you talked about the animals, so that I was moved by the story and lifted by it, but there's still a weight at the pit of my stomach because of knowing what is going on for the two women and the families that you mentioned, that personalizes and crystallizes all the suffering of all of the people.
Thank you very much,
So,
Rachel. Just this morning, I
thank
got a
you.
message from my good friend Ashraf Kuhail, who is a senior teacher trainer, and he's in the north of Gaza at the moment. And his message was simply, we're dying, we're starving, and we have no water.
Yes.
Moira, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you for this story, David. I also, as Rachel said, I was in it every moment. It was just beautiful. I missed the beginning, but I sort of can reconstruct it from your comments.
Moira, I learned it from this wonderful woman, Heba
Yeah,
Hamida. She's a
it's
teacher
very,
trainer, an academic,
yeah. Could,
and also a teacher of English and a storyteller. And
and she lives
I,
in Gaza?
I've had I've had more than 20 teachers from Gaza on my storytelling courses. The storytelling courses I offer, I always offer places that I make it affordable for everybody.
Yeah.
And if people can't pay anything, they have places that are, that are given fully funded. And I've always had there's always been a lot of interest from Gaza, and Heba and Hanin and Hend and all of these teachers are
So,
people who
so
I really admire. Ashraf, who I just mentioned as well, are all people who've done
yeah.
courses with me,
Hanin,
and they're
what
the most
is
fabulous storytellers.
yeah. Hanin, what is her family name?
Hanin Khaled Jadala.
Alejandra.
If you
So
look
if
in if you look in the link in the chat,
uh,
Moira, that's all the information is there. If
I'll
they
find it there.
and
Okay,
Hanin and I
Yeah, I see it now.
and Hanin and I wrote an article about the
Mm,
project that we started on the 1st of January
mm,
called Tell a Child in Gaza's Tale, where
yeah.
I shared one story every day for 65 days up until the
Mm,
13th of January, of recordings of children from Gaza telling stories, which they'd done with me and through the World Storytelling Cafe 2020 to 2023. So I shared those recordings, and then on the 1st of January, we started Tell a Child in Gaza's Tale. So inviting people to listen to these 65 stories, not all of them, but to choose a story that grabs your attention and
mm,
retell it as a tribute to the child. And as Hanin talks about, that after this is over, because the children in Gaza who haven't got school going on right now, one day they will be able to hear these stories being retold, and they will know that there were people who were, you know, keeping their culture
yeah.
alive, and their choices.
Yeah, so thanks for what you're doing. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but it
It's
made a
very
huge, it
it's very
made it,
easy for all of you to get involved. Just get in touch with me if you want to retell a
yeah.
child's story, if you want to tell the poem by Refat Alaria in English or any other language. Just get in touch, and it's so welcome. The more people from around the world who are getting involved, the more we're spreading the words of joy. This is what storytellers. This is what we can do. We can make change.
Yeah, at least I can talk for myself, David, because I'm it's hard for me not to take sides because I have family in Israel,
Sure.
and sort of it's not that I don't notice what's going on, but a story opens so much more. And there's a wonderful poem by an American rabbi called Taking Sides. I don't know whether you know that one. And this is
I've come across the poem many times on Facebook over the last couple of months.
yeah, it's good if it goes viral. And yeah, thanks
Well, I
for
have to say, I'm going to be really honest with you, Moira. I find it a bit problematic.
yeah, okay, but to take the side of peace is not okay. It would be
Yeah,
lovely to talk
I
with
always
you, but
say
there's not the time
I'm
for it.
taking the side of children. That's the way I put it. Yeah.
Okay, well, but that's the direction it's going anyway. So the way I read it. Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do want to just emphasise that I abhor what happened on the 7th of October. If there's any misunderstanding, and I have many Jewish storyteller friends. I have many Jewish friends, and I love Judaism and what Judaism stands for. And the three pillars of Judaism, for me, are in direct opposition to what's happening right now. So I just want to make that very clear, that I don't think there's any relationship between Netanyahu's regime and what Judaism is.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on from
And
the
likewise, I'm sure there's a big distinction between Hamas's dedication to the eradication of Israel and the feelings of most Gazan people. So it's a tragic situation.
Absolutely.
It's a
Eric.
tragic situation where the leaders are warmongers and the people have to suffer for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lies get told. I've been working with children in Gaza since 2017, and I've never heard a story that is about hate.
Mm-hmm.
right. Yes, politics is all around us, and it's difficult not to take sides. It's difficult to keep your ground and look at it very objectively. But I think as storytellers, we are trying to do our best. And at times it's good to tell both the sides of the story in different ways. And I guess that's what all of us are trying to do. Thank you once again, David, for that story and the background, and appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm sure
Thank
most of
you.
us would reach out to you and try and be a part of the project in whichever way we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Eric, and thank you for all
Thank
your
you,
comments.
David.
Right. Our next storyteller for the day is Mihaela Rau. Mihaela, I'm really sorry if I've got your name wrong. We have Mihaela from Romania. Mihaela, please introduce yourself properly and tell us a story. Let me just spotlight you. Yeah.
Hello. I'm very happy and a bit nervous to be here with you and to represent Romania as a storyteller. Let me say that as a storyteller, I'm quite young. And it's a big honor for me to be here with you. I'm very happy. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, Georgiana and Ioana, because I represent Atelier de Cuvinte, our association in Romania. And it's a bit difficult to tell a story after David. David, who we met one or two of our monthly circles, storyteller circles in Romania. I'll first to introduce myself properly, as you said. I'm a mother of three sons and a wonderful stepdaughter. But as I said, as a storyteller, I'm a little girl. I used to tell stories in a local radio station for about 4 years, but some years ago. Then I found Georgiana and Ioana and Atelier de Cuvinte. It's a words workshop in English, and we try to find the our better version of storytellers. I chose for today a story, a true story. I think we can find a small connection with the story David told you. My story is called Luludi. You'll find soon why. This is one of the many real stories about immigration and hope for a better life. It's about youth, innocence, and courage. It's about places on earth where we are on the same position. We are all the same. It's about the fact that violence could cause problems and make us and other innocent people suffer. Not very long time ago, there was a young Romanian woman, a little before her 20s, who didn't enter college she wanted. And also being in love was far from her fiancé. The fiancé, chose to immigrate in Greece, where he had some relatives, and started working there. One day he had the great idea to call her in Greece. So they would work together to build a better start for their life as a couple. She agreed to go there, and even if her parents were worried, she decided to try this way. Her heart split in two, a part remaining home with her parents because she had no brothers or sisters, and a part thirsty for love, for adventure, for the wisdom of a better future, was beating strongly in her chest. She was ready to walk for kilometers because, she trained to do this for a couple of months. She knew she won't need many clothes or many other things young women would take in a luggage, and a young woman could suffer if she doesn't have something like this. But the adventure was quite interesting from the beginning. They would walk during the night and hide during the day. Oh, I think I forgot to tell you that it was illegal immigration. Romanian people needed visa to enter Greece at that time. She was in a group of 4 people, siblings of her fiancé. In Serbia, they decided to join a large group of other people. Together, they slept on the floor in a big barn in Serbia, and in a house, also on the floor, on some mattresses in Macedonia. She heard a lot of shocking for her at that moment. She heard a lot of stories from the girls in that group, girls who used to work in Greece, as they used to say, as dancers. When they arrived Greece, the 4 of them decided to go their way, walking a whole night in circle, guided by a big and beautiful July moon. It was quite painful for them when they realized in the morning that the footprints in front of them were theirs. They had to find a refuge to wait for the night coming. Their luck was close to a pond with dead fish, where they waited and had some rest, eating their bread that became crumbs, and hoping for better luck for their last night on the road. The big moon also guided their way during the next night, and finally they arrived safely on the Greece territory. It was a beautiful moon. This is was what she thought at that moment, but later realized that a big light was not such a great luck on a road like theirs. But they were lucky, and the frontier police didn't catch them. She was tired, but happy to get much closer to the man she loved and to their dream together. They were very happy to be together again, but unfortunately, their happiness was interrupted soon and I was telling you before about violence. It was interrupted by a fight between two Romanian neighbors. Police came, and the young couple, without a visa, arrived at the police station. The young Romanian woman with her fiancé and also their dream had to wait for about 45 days in a basement in Athens. Beautiful Athens. She hoped to visit with its great cultural centers and so on. After a month free in the hot capital of Greece, as Athens is, she was now listening to people's steps, looking to their shoes through the small window in the upper part of the wall of the basement room. Even she was sad, she found people from her country there. They started to communicate. They became friends with some other people who got there for different reasons, from different countries and cultures. The former office that became a temporary room for illegal immigrants, as many as they were, and that room were kept for a while, especially women and sick or injured people, injured men, became a kind of storytelling club. People there started to sleep during the day more. It was also much easier to wait for the 2 meals of the day. And they started to communicate more until late in the evenings, hoping that the time will pass faster. They used to make fun of the greenish oranges they got. They told stories and, of course, made plans. Some of them weren't for the first time there. One of the Asian immigrants who worked there in a tailor shop and also used to sell flowers told her one day, happy that she was very polite and kind to him, that she was as beautiful as a flower, as a rose. A flower in Greek is luludi. She was selling luludia. And when they left that place to go back to Romania, he promised her he would offer her a rose if they meet some other day outside. He also taught her to say shokran. Time passed, her way changed, but she didn't lose either her courage, a big dose of innocence, and trust in people around her. She also didn't lose youth and, of course, hope. And if it's correct, shukran.
Thank you, Mihaela. That's such a heartwarming story. And did you say this is a true story? Is it your story, did you say?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Some really great experiences you've had. I think it's always special, as I was telling to June, when you share a personal story. Definitely your face glows and it shows. The connect is always there, both for you as a teller and for us as listeners when we listen to a personal story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's good to finish once again at, a sense of positivity, a sense of hope. Really love that, Mihaela. Thanks a lot. Opening it
I
out to
also
the
thank you.
audience. Yes, yes, please. Yes, anybody, any thoughts?
Congratulations, Miha. Thank you very much for sharing this story and maybe also representing us. Thank you for taking your time to share a story that is personal, and you always were the courageous one from our company. So good to you. Love you.
Thank you very much. It's very important for me to see you, both of you here, and I know the other girls are with me. I can feel them here inside. I've got such a big heart at the moment. Thank you very much, and good luck to everyone.
Yes. Anybody else? So, Mihaela, have you shared this story earlier? Have you shared it before? Is it your first time?
A part of it, because it's a big story. I could make small parts of the story and to make bigger stories from all these parts. It's a kind of initiating road for the young Romanian woman with so many steps, important steps. And a part of it, I shared in a cultural magazine in our country a few years ago. It's written somewhere.
Okay, lovely. Yes. Yes, June, you want to go ahead?
Hell yeah, I really liked the part of the tension you put in when they were walking around in circles with the moon. I mean, I think I could see those footsteps and the shock when they found out that they'd gone in a circle. I really liked that tension you had. So well done.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? So, Miha, did you say you have a group of people around here from people that you know who have come to support you today? Mihaela, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes, I have. My mentor, Georgiana, and Ioana, they're here with me. And I know some other girls from our company are there with me, listening or at least praying for me, which is not so little.
I think it's a very positive feeling, right? To know that you have people around you listening to you,
Yes, of
supporting you
course.
in whichever way they can. And I think that's the best part ever.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Yes. David, you want to go ahead?
I just wanted to say to Mihaela, I really enjoyed that, and I hope that I can get to meet you in the end of October, because I'm coming to Romania, invited by Ioana and Georgiana. So maybe you'll be there in Arad or Timișoara when I'm there. I hope so.
Hopefully. I'm also waiting for this. I couldn't be in Arad in 2023, but hopefully in 2024 I'm there. I'm looking forward to meeting you as well. Thank you.
Lovely. So now we are making meeting plans as well over this. Excellent. Just what we want to do, especially when it is, the whole world is coming together at the festival. So thank you, Eric, once again for that. So helping people meet in person as well, making plans. Moving on to our next teller for the day, we have Les Schaffer from Virginia. Let me just spotlight you, Les.
Thank you.
Yes, could you please introduce yourself fully and share a story with us?
Well, thank you. Well, I'm Les Schaffer. The other end of the age spectrum from the last teller. I during my when I was working for a living, worked with as we say here in the States, troubled youth for many, many years, mainly inner city kids in the Richmond area. And work through, I don't know what else to call it, the cocaine wars of the 1980s, the 90s, early 2000s, and still going out on. I noticed in the news this morning a 19-year-old boy in Richmond was shot, killed yesterday, and it was a familiar name. Not quite sure I knew him, but if I didn't know him, I guarantee I knew somebody in his family. And it was always very frustrating um, to work in sort of a micro environment and figure out what can you do to help, if anything, other than, well, I don't know. But in the early 1990s, I was at a men's workshop in Washington, D.C., and heard writer and mythologist Michael Meade speak and tell some African dilemma stories. And they really grabbed my attention. And they're used, the dilemma tales in Africa. And I think you've probably got a tradition of dilemma tales of some sort in India too. But in Africa, there are really large, diverse class of what we would call folk tales, and they offer their narratives that leave you, the listener, with a choice among alternatives. And when used as they were in Africa, and still are, as far as I know, with young people, it's a way of teaching people how to disagree, to argue, to verbally fight if you need to, but do this in a way that nobody gets hurt. The tales often end with a choice, and a difficult one. And then it's up to the group, it's up to the individuals in the group to try to figure out, what's the appropriate ending for this story. Let me share one of these tales with you, and maybe at the end you can spend a couple of minutes thinking about how you think this story might end. I want to do the one. Actually, it's the one I heard Michael tell in 1990. I think in 1994, and I think the title of the story is "The Lizard in the Fire," and it's a tale that originated with the Lope people, a large community that came out of the Congo area and spread into Central Africa, and still a vibrant community. So here's the lizard in the fire. A father, as fathers sometimes often are, I was, a father can be fearful. This father in this place, he worried about his son. And throughout the boy's growth from young toddler to on the verge of adulthood, he always told his son things like, if you ever lie side by side with a maiden, you will die. And the boy heard this his whole life. And when he got to be what we would call a teenager, the father grew even more fearful. He knew how it was with teenagers. He'd been one himself. So he took his son against his wife's wishes, but he took his son and hid his son in a place in the bush. And he let the boy grow up there in the forest. Well, as you can imagine, for a young teenager, being alone is one of the worst things. Oh, he saw his father every day. His father would come and bring him food and usually leave him with, if you lie side by side with a maiden, you will die, just as surely as if a sword went through your heart. Ay, but the boy was so lonely. One day, out there in the bush, in that place, that lonely place he lived, who comes along but a young maiden, and a beautiful young maiden. Oh, what a balm for his eyes, what a balm for his soul. She saw the boy saw her. She told him, "Oh, you live so alone here. Can I visit you?" And the boy said, "I have to warn you. My father has told me I would die. I will die if I ever lay side by side with a maiden, as if a sword pierced my heart." And the maiden said, "Well, in that case, I'll not come again. It's not my wish that you shall die." But the boy was so alone. "No, please come back. I beg you. Please come anyway. Ah, you remember the risks you take as a young person." So the maiden said, "Good, I'll come back. I'll come back tomorrow. And if you die, maybe we can bring you back to life again." And she went. Next day she came back. And before long, before the end of that day, the youth and the maiden lay side by side together on his mat. And sometimes your father is right. That boy, he died. Just died there on the mat. Just as his father said. What was the maiden going to do? She had to tell the parent. She knew that. And she ran back to the village that the boy came from. What did the father do? What did the mother do? What do parents do? You weep and you weep and you weep. But the maiden, what did she do? She ran back deep into the forest. She ran to the old wise person who lives there deep, deep in the bush. And she told the wise person the whole story. And this wise person said, "Why, that's not a problem. All we need is a lizard and a fire." So the wise person went out to get a lizard. The youth's body was brought to the village. Wood was gathered and piled up in his direction. A great fire was lit. The young people and all the people in the village gathered all around. And when the flames were great and high, the lizard was set in the fire. And now the wise person said, "Now here's the situation we're in. If the lizard burns on the funeral pyre, the young man will stay dead. But if someone pulls the lizard from the fire, the young man will return to life again." The father, of course, tried to run into the fire to pull the lizard out, but the flames were huge and hot. He was driven back. The mother went forward, but she too was driven back by the raging flames. But that maiden, she jumped right into the center of the fire, pulled out the lizard and brought it back alive and barely singed. And the young man, true to that wise person's thinking, that young man sprang back to life. And now the wise person said, "Well, good, but here's the situation. The young man is back in life again. If he kills the lizard, the mother dies. His mother will die. But if he doesn't kill the lizard, that brave maiden will die. Kill the lizard, and the youth and the young woman will live, but the mother will die. Don't kill the lizard, and the mother and the son will live on." but the maiden will die. And so, my friends, my dear friends, all of you here, I ask you, what is to do? What is the right thing to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Les. I wouldn't want to take that decision. Thankfully, I'm not the boy, but the audience is welcome to take your decisions. Please share your thoughts.
Well, you know, sometimes in life often in life, even though they're horrible choices to make, you have to make some sort of a decision. We don't always have the luxury to pass it off on someone else.
So true, so true. But I do have the luxury right now, so I'm going to utilize that.
Okay. You've got your finger on the button.
So yes, but the fun story definitely indeed. It was we really, at least I couldn't see where the story was going, or I couldn't expect what's going to happen next. So you kept me at the edge throughout the story. I kept thinking what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next. But for me, one thing was very interesting in the story is it's very common to keep the young girls away, to tell them that this you shouldn't be doing because then you might die or something wrong would happen. It's very common for the girl to be kept in an enclosure. It was interesting for once to hear a story where there was a role reversal, and it was, although it was not good, but at least for once it was just to see how it is when a boy is being put in an enclosure. That was a little interesting for me, Les. Thanks so much for that. So
I like that about the story too.
yes.
So what do people do? What should we do?
What should we do? Yes, David?
Well, I just want to ask Les if traditionally that's where the story ends, or is a solution offered? And
Well,
I'm just wondering whether there's, it's one of these stories that we have around the world of some kind of riddle where there is another answer, not the binary answer of the mother or the young maiden, but there's some way that there's a clever answer.
yeah, well, that's the crux of the dilemma story. They all end at this point, and it's up to the audience to try to, and it can only be the best answer for you.
Hmm.
So
There are hundreds, maybe thousands.
Maybe I wasn't being attentive enough, Les, but could you tell me again about the origins of the story?
This one comes from I hope I'm pronouncing it right. The LOPE, the people, a tribal group in Central Africa. But stories all over Africa. These stories came out of the Congo originally, I think, and you can find dilemma stories in Southern Africa. Lots of dilemma stories in the Muslim countries in the north of Africa. And they're still being used in places. And if I was in charge of education here in Richmond, where we got this awful death toll of young people every year, I'd be telling these stories in the schools. But they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. I liked hearing. I hadn't planned it at all, but telling this, the lizard in the fire, after your discussion and story, David, because what's happening now in lots of places in the world, in Gaza, in Israel, in Somalia, still in Ethiopia, Burma, Myanmar, these are stories. There's no easy ending to any of these stories. And yet we have to find, because we're human beings and that's how we work, we have to find a way through somehow when there is no right answer. There is no answer that's going to satisfy everybody. I'll stop. I feel like I'm preaching. And can I give a shout out to my friends, a couple of friends from Richmond who are listening? I see on the list this morning. I think a couple of my students too.
It's good to know your students and your colleagues are here. Dilemma stories are something that I've never heard of before. I don't know about the audience, but this is something completely new to me. And as you said, it kind of makes sense. These are the stories that we need to be telling in schools.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it's probably a good place to start off a debating club in a school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you will get debate. You will get debate. At the meeting in Washington, D.C. that I first heard this particular story, it was like 400 men had come to a day on basically what we could do as men about doing something about healing domestic violence and stopping domestic violence. There was of course, no answer. But this story, Michael Meade tells this story, and like there's a silence when he finished. And then he got the discussion going. And I would say in 3 minutes, the cathedral was in an uproar. Everybody had their answer. Everybody wanted to be heard. Unfortunately, because we were men, we wanted to be heard at the same time and be the loudest. And it was just an uproar. And then settled into this discussion. And again, maybe working on the issue is more important, and talking about the issue in the end may be important than a set solution. I don't know. I thought the father should be the one to get thrown into the fire because he started it, but yet he was coming from fear. And some of the worst things in the world begin with somebody, with a person, a people, a family acting out of fear. I don't know.
So we do have one person who's taken a decision. So David thinks that yes. David, you want to talk about it, or you want to just?
I just thought I'd throw that in the chat, and I thought everybody might just want to say in the chat what your thinking is, because we haven't got time for the discussion between all of us, have we? But everyone must have a point of view, I guess. But the obvious thing to me is, well, his mother couldn't bear the flames, but Maiden did, so she seems to have earned the right to live, but that's pretty hard on the mother.
Yeah. Whatever you do, it's going to be hard on someone. Wherever the issue. And Sarika Day, I love your answer. Maybe there's another wise. Well, there is another wise person in the bush who's got a different idea. And then June Brown, the mother willingly gives up her life for her son. This is one of the things that drew me to this story, I think. My mother did that. And she did it for me. I'm only here because she took a chance on birthing me at a time when she knew there was a good chance she wasn't going to survive, and she didn't. And it took me to become a father, grandfather, great-grandfather, to understand what most parents, I would gladly give my life. I would jump into the fire, and I have jumped into the fire for my kids, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. Of course.
That's an interesting question Regina has thrown there. Has anyone asked the lizard if it wants to be sacrificed? How very true. You just pick a lizard as if it's nothing from the bushes and just toss it off in the fire. That's so unfair.
Didn't ask to be there.
I know.
Ever tried asking a lizard anything? No.
You said that just as I was throwing my comment into the chat.
Ah,
Okay. I think now that's going to be a very interesting chat to watch. But before we do that, let's move on to our next teller. We have,
thank you.
thanks once again, Les. Yes, and as I said, a very interesting story and something completely new for me. And you got all the audience thinking and wondering and taking sides. Yes, that is something that we were trying to avoid a little while ago. Coming on to our next and final teller for the day, we have Regina Rest from New Mexico. Let me just spotlight you, Regina. I had the opportunity to meet Regina in person when she came down to Chennai a few years ago for the Chennai Storytelling Festival. It's good to see you online, Regina. Please introduce yourself and share a story with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you all. Some of these faces and folks and voices are familiar. Hello from New Mexico, which is the southwest part of the United States. That's where I am. I am a storyteller, have been for about 35 years out in the field, as they say. Before that, I was acting. So I've been a live performer basically all my life. Now we're on Zoom, and so it's kind of like being TV people. And I teach as well. I teach at NYU, but so I just joke and say I talk for a living. I talk for a living. And I have a story for you today. I've called it In a Teepee Made of Charcoal. I've been a lot of places on this gorgeous planet. I'm madly in love with the planet Earth. And when anybody asks me what's the most beautiful place you've ever been, I generally say, well, I don't like to deal in superlatives and contests, but no place can beat Big Sur, California. Some of you may know Big Sur in person, or from a lot of car ads are made there because there's a highway that goes through and it's a famous, so a lot of the car ads you see on television were made in Big Sur. It's a wild piece of the California coast. It's about midway down the state, and it's where the Ventana wilderness clings to the last bit of continental US before the continent plunges into the Pacific. Ventana in Spanish means window, and that western wilderness, it opens a window to the Pacific and to the world beyond. Maybe if you stand there, you can even see India. Most of the year, the grass is golden brown. And when the winter rains come, the hillsides turn emerald. It's just incredible. There are high cliffs on that coast, high cliffs. Great boulders form the edge of the land. The deep blue Pacific waves crash against the continent there. And because of all that, the negative ions spark the air. It's from the force of the waves and the wind on the rocks. Totally alive place. There's a narrow 2-lane road called Highway 1, California 1, and it winds tenuously down the coast. The road runs between the cliffs, which rise on the eastern side, to the blue sky. And then down on the western side, they fall away to the pounding ocean. At the side of the road, wild fennel grows. It's got little lacy flowers, and they fill the air with a pungent and recognizable aroma, fennel. Walking along the 2-lane highway, you're bathed in this brilliant light, electric air, and the scent of licorice from the fennel. There's steep-walled canyons that cut through the Ventana. They're very narrow, steep walls, and rising from those canyons are dark red-brown giants. Those are the redwood trees. And the needles of the redwoods grow at the top like a mop of blue-green hair. And when you look up the redwoods, tall, tall trees, that opens to the sky. There are usually hawks soaring overhead. In winter, you can see gray whales swimming south to give birth by Baja. And in the spring, you can see those same whales swimming north with their young. The beauty of Big Sur's window opens the senses, and it enfolds you if you're fortunate to be there in an embrace, a powerful embrace. And it reminds you of where we all are on this planet. I used to visit Big Sur often. I generally stayed with my cousin Ray. He was living in a tiny cabin precariously perched right above that highway. And one noon on a visit, when I was there one time in the afternoon, I was walking down Highway 1. I was smelling the licorice in the air. I was feeling the brilliance of that buffeted, if you know, the negative ion buffeted air. I noticed that over my head was a hawk, a red-tailed hawk, big, beautiful bird. And it was so low, I could see its feathers, I could see its eyes, its beak. And I stopped in my tracks. I just stopped. I didn't move. I felt its presence, and I watched it, and it began to circle me. It circled and circled. And I stood for what felt a very long time underneath that hawk circling. I thought, I wonder if he's looking for lunch in my hair. I wasn't too sure. It circled and circled and circled. Now, I was on my way somewhere. You know how we humans who always have to be somewhere, right? I was going down the road. I had a short-term job at Esalen Institute. It's a very interesting conference and workshop center, and it's perched right on the cliff overlooking the ocean. I had to go. I had to be somewhere. I'm a human. I'm busy, right? So I walked away from the hawk. I walked out of his circle. And the hawk flew on ahead of me. And when I got down the road a little ways, he circled me again. He began again. And I went, well, you best pay attention, Regina. This is a messenger. I stood still. I waited till he was finished with me. There was no place I had to be but right there. And I watched and I waited and I waited. This was his cliff. This was his ceremony. And then he flew off, flew back up the mountains. And what I knew from that experience was that I had been welcomed by the creatures of Big Sur. Now, a couple weeks later, it was a crystal clear day. I wasn't working that day. And Ray, and he took me for a walk. He took me for a walk into one of those very narrow, dark canyons that cut through the wilderness. Now, walks with Ray were often a challenge, and they were always interesting. And that morning, we left the cabin. We went up above his cabin, and we went up a very rutted, muddy dirt road, which wound cautiously up the mountain behind the cabin. And it made switchbacks, very narrow switchbacks. And so we would pause at every single one and look out to see. We would look down the coast, down south, up the coast. We looked out over the Pacific, and then we continued. At some point, Ray stopped, gestured, and disappeared down a very tight switchback. It was off the road. It was onto a narrow dirt path. Now, lore had it that the trail had originally been made by the indigenous people there, the Esalen Indians, hundreds of years before. One of Ray's semi-official projects was to clear and open some of the old native trails in that wilderness. And we walked very carefully along the inside edge of the steep footpath. I was used to the mountains in the eastern part of the US, or ancient granite mountains in the Appalachian Mountains, but this is different. This is new land. It crumbles. It crumbles. So walking on the outside edge might create a slide of pebbles or a slide of oneself down into the canyon. So we walked slowly and cautiously and went down that fragile trail to the bottom. And we were in the narrow valley between the steep walls of the canyon. There was a stream. It was clear. It was cold. We washed the dust off our faces. There'd been a wildfire through that canyon a few years before, and the trunks of most of the redwoods were charred. They were black. Fire is one reason many of those canyons are so dark. But we looked up, and if you looked up the soaring trunks of tall trees, we saw above the line where the flames had blackened them, the thick bark was the red-brown color that gives the trees their name. And at the very top swayed the canopy of blue-green needles. These giants, though badly burnt, were still growing. Well, gesturing for me to follow, Ray took me along the stream to one particular tree. There was a dark hole in the side of it. It gaped open like the mouth of a cave. And without speaking, Ray ducked and entered the tree. So I ducked and followed him into the tree. And I sat down in that was very dark and cool, burnt out tree trunk. We sat there, and I realized we were sitting on a soft mound of charcoal. And the blackened skin of the tree wrapped around us like a teepee, like a tent. We sat inside there in stillness. We sat immersed in deep silence of the tree and the earth. And as I sat there in that teepee made of charcoal, my heart and my senses opened to the spirit of the tree. And it gave me a message. You want to hear the message? If our roots are firmly planted in the earth, and like the redwoods, the roots reach out to intertwine with our community. If our skins are thick and resilient, and if we reach up and up with our spirits to the sky and to the universe beyond, then no matter how burnt out we get from the fires of life, not only will we continue to live, but like those trees, we'll continue to grow.
Wow, Regina, beautiful. How poetic. And it's
True story.
always a pleasure to watch you tell. I've never heard you tell a personal story, so it's a very different one for me. Loved it, loved every bit of it. I love the way you started explaining in detail, helping us picturize the whole scene, the water gushing in and hitting against the cliffs, the tall trees. Oh, very, very, very vivid, very, very clear. And I just loved your telling, Regina. Thank you so much for sharing this story.
Thank you for letting me share Big Sur with you. But you know, you know, all the wise folks say, slow down, stop, listen, show up, be present. And we don't, we're busy, busy, busy.
Hmm.
So I know that an overarching theme in the festival is, you know, is healing or is growth, you know, well, listen to the trees. My prayer is, if there is such a thing as reincarnation, my prayer is I want to come back as a tree.
Wow. Very beautiful. Love the thought. Love the thought. Yes, anybody wants to share their reflections on this? I'm sure there's lots of reflections. Yes, Les, please go ahead.
Don't the redwoods, aren't they the trees that they need fire to sprout the seeds?
Sounds right. I mean,
Yeah.
if you know anything about out there, there's fires a lot out there. And so they must have evolved to, you know, work with what they're given. They're given a lot of fire. So
Yeah.
that, yeah, sounds good. Sounds right.
I don't believe they can sprout without the fire.
Well, a lot of things can't really grow without, you know, the frost and the freeze. If we don't get the freeze in the winter, we don't get the apples. So it's a working together. There's that community thing again. Because I didn't know that about redwood roots, that and now we know so much about trees that they are in community. And if there's a tree in that group that's having a problem, the other trees send it chemicals it needs through the roots. So they work in community. Yeah. I love that. I love that image.
It's a very strong message about how we need to work as a community, and that is the need of the hour, isn't it? Coming back to the discussions that we had earlier, the story that David had shared, the reflections that we are having, the situations that we're talking about, the politics that we're talking about. If we don't work together as a community, then that is the best solution. We need to work as a community, look at doing things together. There's no right or wrong, there's no taking sides. There's the question about working together. And I think that's a very powerful message you've shared, Regina. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. And it's not just with, you know, other humans, it's with the whole, everything, interbeing, everything.
True, true. And it brings me back to the question that you asked, you know, did anybody ask the lizard, does it want to be thrown in? Right? So that is what it is. Are we looking at it as a whole? Are we just looking at everything around us as one single part of us? Yes, June, you want to go ahead?
Regina, your description was so wonderful. I've been on that highway several times, but you made me want to go out and buy a plane ticket today to get back and experience again. It was, I wanted those ions from the sea to hit me again. And the whole message in your story, of course, was wonderful. So thank you for sharing such a beautiful story.
You're welcome.
Regina, when you said you can almost see India from Big Sur, I had to go look at the map. Here, I'm going to show you the map.
Oh dear. Yeah, I know you're a bit further south.
No, the only thing is like Thailand is kind of blocking us.
Dang.
There's Chennai, and then the North Pacific, and there's Big
Hawaii.
Sur.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that Pacific Ocean is really there.
However, anything's possible with the mind's eye.
Absolutely. Well,
If you want it hard, if you want it bad enough, it can happen.
No, I almost feel the south east coast of India is almost part of the Pacific Rim, but as you see, officially we're a little blocked, but in spirit we're part of the Pacific Rim.
Right.
Maybe a couple of mirrors just properly placed on satellites.
Yeah. Okay.
Bruce has made up his mind to go to Big Sur and look for India from there, some way or the other. That's very encouraging, Bruce. Yes.
Hey, if what's her name can see Russia from her backyard, Americans will know the reference I'm making.
Thank you. Thank you for calling her what's her name.
Oh.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Regina, and everybody. Please come back well, yeah, I'm doing a session next, but come back a day and a half from now, which India time will be Sunday morning. Regina is leading a workshop in, is it how do we choose stories? Do I have it right, Regina?
Well, it's if we have either a performance or a class, could be anything, and we go somewhere, but something massive has happened, either in the world or just in terms of that community, and you know their minds are on that thing. How do you adjust? Do you adjust your program? And how do you adjust your program? Knowing that their minds are not going to be with you, you might as well adjust. My theory is you might as well adjust. And I talk about being in a school in a lower Manhattan school 3 days after 9/11 happened, and 3 of their parents were missing in the buildings, you know, and what did I do? But a lot of instances like that, that's the big one, but there are smaller instances where, you know, what's going on in that audience that maybe through story, you don't address it, you address something indirectly. That's why I love the folk tales, for example, because you can talk about things, or if not about it, then find a way to bring some focus and some peace to the people who are sitting there, who may be, you know, looking for a way to slow down and watch the hawk and not be, and so that's what it's about, is
Great.
you know.
Great.
Yeah.
So ways to choose or shape stories to speak to the moment.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you
And
for your clarity. You're more
sure.
awake than I am.
Well, yeah, see, for Regina in the middle of the USA, which is just about the opposite on the other side of the globe, for Regina, it's Friday morning for you, right? Early Friday morning.
Yeah, well, it's 8:20 or so
All right.
in the
For us,
morning.
it's coming on 9 p.m. Friday
Right.
night, and your workshop, for you, it's Saturday night, but for us, it's Sunday morning.
Right.
So
I tell people that and they go, what? I said, it's 12 and a half hours. Not only is it 12 hours, there's a half to make it interesting.
well, that's India. India decided to be half different from almost everybody else.
Yeah, and in Germany it will be 4:30 in the morning. But I'm decided to put on the alarm clock, so I hope I met it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording now.